Hey everybody, this week's guest on the podcast is the great David Bottrill. David is a record producer and mixer, and he's worked with Silverchair, Peter Gabriel, Tool, King Crimson, Rush, The Smashing Pumpkins. David was kind enough to talk to me on my podcast, and I really appreciate his time and his knowledge. And with everything in these podcasts, I learn from the people I talk to, so thank you, David. And everyone should check out David's work. Go to davidbottrill.com, and I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Hey David, how are you?
Hey Paul, I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good. I climbed a mountain today and I'm a bit tired.
Which mountain is that then?
It's Queen Maeve. It's not an impressively high mountain. So
okay.
It's only an hour. So it's not too good, but yeah, it was good fun.
Oh, hill.
Yeah, okay, yeah, an Irish hill.
Irish hill.
How's the crazy times we're living in treating you?
Actually, to be honest with you, it's affected me in more social ways than in professional ways.
Okay.
Work got maybe a little quieter, but as I work from home, you can see my studio here, I don't actually have to go out and go to studios as much.
Yeah.
If I'm recording things, obviously I will do that, full band or something like that. But as far as mixing goes, I do that all here. So it's really not affected me as much as it's affected other people.
Yeah. And kind of nowadays, like you only really need to go to, well, for most things is to record drums in a studio. You can kind of track everything at home, and, once you have a vocal booth, and it's
pretty much. I can't really track full-on heavy cabinet guitars. And that.
Right.
That's a little bit much, but sort of simulated cabinet guitars, I can do that.
Yeah.
And if we want any kind of vocals, I've got spaces around my place where people can go. So, that's fine. Anything sort of mildly acoustic guitars. My place is pretty quiet, even though I'm sort of downtown Toronto. The direction I face and the lack of neighbors makes it such that I can pretty much record anything without too much interruption.
Oh, that's cool. And are you like mixing purely in the box, or are you hybrid-y kind of thing? Purely in the box?
Purely in the box.
Wow, man. That's impressive. Yeah. That's so good.
I've been doing that for probably the last, 10, 12 years.
Really? Wow. Jeez. Do you find it's easier for recall? People want to like say, hey, can you put that vocal up? And you're like, oh, dude. I imagine back in the day, it must have been so difficult.
Hours to any small adjustment. But here's the difference, Paul. Nowadays, because you can do this, then people do it, right? I mean, the things that you can do now with recall and automation and things like that are so precise that people do those things. Before, we just accepted what we had and lived with things that were imperfections. And I find that it's sort of a double-edged sword, really. You get to do exactly what you want. I've often found that the happy accidents and the things that kind of stick out of a mix sometimes become actually my favorite parts, and the imperfections kind of become charming after a while.
I agree.
So, we spend our lives ironing out every little wrinkle and every fixing every little problem, and I wonder if that's really the wisest thing from just a musical interest standpoint.
Yeah, there's always like those little things in 60s records. If you really listen to them closely, you can hear like bleed of things, and that's what makes those like, Beach Boys records, Pet Sound and those kind of records. They have this sound to them that you can't emulate overdubbing one at a time. And you can, but it just has a vibe and a sound that it just, I don't know, it just has a vibe.
There's a certain life and sort of studio verite charm to Little Mistakes.
Yeah. It's and you can go on forever. Like when I did my first record, I spent 5 years making it. Like I was crazy. Like you listen to a snare every day, and then you're like, oh, I could do it this way. Yeah, too much choice is sometimes a bad thing for us humans. I think.
I find that after a certain amount of time, your changes are not necessarily making things better. They're just making them different.
Exactly.
we spend our lives chasing a certain thing, and then we get bored of it and we start chasing something else. And there comes a point, I think, when you just have to really let go.
Yeah, that's probably why mixers are a good idea outside mixing for yourself if you're making something, because you're always going to critique everything worse than anyone else,
Yes.
inward wise. So it's
exactly.
So what was it like working with Tool?
Well, they were great. They were amazing musicians, great writers, and even greater people. So it was a pleasant experience all around.
Yeah, you did Lateralis, didn't you?
And Anima.
Oh wow, man.
And Salival.
Oh, that was like a live
record.
Yeah.
And we did the cover of No Quarter. Zeppelin's No
cool.
Quarter as well.
That's cool. The Lateralis, I think, sounds amazing, that record.
Thank you.
It's such an amazing record. Did Tool always kind of had that kind of thing? I know they were a rock band or progressive rock, but they always had that kind of thing, like it was like Pink Floyd and Peter Gabriel, those ethnic kind of sounds. And did you learn a lot from working with Peter Gabriel? I'm sure with African-y sounds and all ethnic sounds.
Infinite amount, yeah. I was exposed to music that I would have maybe been exposed to in Canada, but not nearly to the degree. I was able to take a really deep dive into learning about music from all over the world, and now I apply those lessons to the music that I'm making today.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Like, did you work on The Passion? Serious production on that. Wow, Thanks. Man. That's cool. So do you listen to a lot of music, or I suppose it's hard, you're probably just listening to demos all the time?
Most of the time I'm listening to demos and the work that I'm doing. Yeah, that's the truth. But, I do listen, a lot in the car when I'm driving around.
Okay. I first was fully aware. I'm sure I heard your stuff many times, but I wasn't aware of it when you did Diorama. I think there's so many people that love that record that at the time, I don't remember anyone listening to it, especially in a tiny town like where I was from. I think about 3 or 4 people were like, oh my God, this record. Because everything, the songs were great and the production was great and the Van Dyke Park arrangements are great and Larry Mahubrick, everything about that record just was perfectly fit with each other. If it had a different production technique, it just wouldn't, it just, everything just gelled for that record.
Yeah, I was really disappointed as to how that record was treated from a marketing standpoint. I think the label at the time didn't really understand the kind of record that they had, and their expectations on Daniel and the band were different than what was delivered. Even though we had lots of discussions and meetings beforehand about the kind of record that we were going to make. And there was, from my standpoint, there really wasn't any confusion as to what we were planning to deliver to them. And I think they sort of, I guess, discounted what that was and thought, well, at the end of the day, he'll probably write us a couple of big, radio rock hits and we'll be fine. Right. But I knew at the outset of that record that what Daniel wanted to do was indeed make his pet sounds. And I said that to the label, and the manager knew that was what was going to happen. So I was sort of disappointed in the way that it was released and promoted after we delivered that record, because like you, I get a lot of people coming up to me and saying how important they felt that record was to them, how much it meant to them and how great they thought it was. And I just thought, if you'd have marketed that like they marketed OK Computer, and I'm not equating the two albums, but they're both esoteric in their own way. And I think if you had, if the people who were working that record had done it in that way, it could have been more successful than it was, because it kind of fell through the cracks.
And I always felt like, I remember when that record came out first, it was like that record came out, and at the same time I started to get into Pet Sounds. So those two kind of records were melding together for me. Not they don't sound the same, but they have that, that ambition in them. And I could never understand some of the reviews I read on Diorama, over here anyways, that would be slating and give these. I'm like, what? I'm like, did you listen to the same record? It was it wasn't fashionable to be doing that kind of ambitious stuff at the time. You know, like a lot of new metal was around, and that could have hurt them too, I guess, in that perspective.
Maybe, I don't really, obviously I will read reviews every now and again. But I think, as you said, they're often based upon the sort of style and fashion at the time, and not judging them on the nature of the music and the productions and, of what's going on. Are they good songs? Are they good songs? Or are they not good songs? Do they sound good? Are they produced well? Like as far as critiques, like, well, I don't like this record because it's not my style. Well, okay, you might not, but maybe you're not the right person to be reviewing this record then. Like you can say it's like, well, it's poorly played. The musicians weren't very good, or the songwriting is not that good, or the singing was not that good. I mean, I don't think you could level those criticisms at that record. The musicianship is top notch. The singing is great, and the songwriting is good. It's esoteric. It's different. Mm-hmm. But that's just a stylistic difference, and that's a very subjective thing. So, okay, subjectively, you didn't like it because it's not to your taste. Fair enough. That's the critique you can give of something that you don't like.
Yeah, but the criticism. It's never that simple as people are always like, I don't like it, ergo it's not good. I actually remember there was a Diorama documentary, and there was this American A&R guy at the time, and he was like, yeah, maybe take out the horns. I'm like, take out the horns? That's the cool part, man. I think it was in Love Your Life or something, like he was on about the do part, or maybe it was The Greatest Hits. But anyways, I was like, what is this guy smoking? But that
was Kevin, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Is he still working there?
One of the two. We had two A&R guys on that record, and as I said, I mean, they're good guys. They're good record company people, but I think they had an expectation of what kind of record they were going to get, and what we delivered to them wasn't what they were expecting.
You mixed Young Modern too, didn't you?
Yes, I mixed Young Modern.
Yeah, good. It's a good record. I like that record, but it's something missing in it. I don't know.
Well, I like that record too. I think the nature of what happened with that record was essentially there were three strong personalities producing that project, and it was kind of pushed and pulled in a lot of different directions. And they brought me in at the very end to mix it and to help sort of edit down, because there was so much going on that they'd already kind of taken out. Because lots of different people were recording lots of different things on these songs, and they were becoming a bit of a mishmash of neither fish nor flesh, or whatever you want.
Right.
And so I came in at the end to try and take it over the finish line. I think it's a very good record. The songs are really good. It just suffers maybe a little bit from a confused direction. Just because of the three different personalities pulling it in three different directions.
And Diorama is just so good. I think it can be hard to follow a record that's so good, because your expectations are always going to be massively higher when something's like that good.
Sure. I mean, I think, it had been quite a while between those two records, and, Daniel had been quite sick during all of that time.
Oh, the arthritis.
Reactive arthritis, and, couldn't get out of bed for a long time. So, I mean, I really credit his wife at the time, who really kind of nursed him back to health and sort of put her own career on hold. So I thought that was really kind of honorable and good of her. She was that Australian singer Natalie Imbruglia. Mm-hmm. That was his wife at the time, and so her career was doing really well, and she just sort of stopped and nursed him through his illness, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. So
he's got to find me a woman like that. They're hard to come by. Yeah, so did you start working with Daniel Lanois?
Yeah, that's Daniel Lanois. That was my first musical boss.
Cool.
Yeah, he had a studio. He and his brother Bob had a studio in Hamilton called Grant Avenue Studios. It's still there. They don't own it anymore. Yeah, I went there as a green young kid, not knowing anything about studio world, and asked for a job, and they said no, but I could come and hang out. And so I would come and hang out and essentially do a voluntary internship there for about 6 or 7 months. And then when there was a job available, they hired me for $300 a month. And, I did sessions at night, and I did sessions in the daytime and sometimes at night, and then odd jobs in the daytime to, cleaning windows or cutting grass or anything that I could make a bit of money so I could go into the studio and play around.
Oh, cool. Wow. I'd say it's such a different way of recording and everything back then. Everything's probably more intense, and, people probably sleeping at the studio and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that was me.
Wow.
I was sleeping at the studio.
Really?
Yeah, sure.
It's cool, man. I kind of wish I grew up younger in a different time, because my generation's missed that kind of vibe of it.
Yeah, well, but you've got a different thing, right? The ability to have really top quality recording systems at home, right? Which we never had. Anything that you recorded, you had to go to a studio to do it. Right?
Yeah, it's always one thing, Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, leverages that. Like, I couldn't even dream of having this stuff 15 years ago, or what you can do in your room is astonishing. Like, it's quite amazing. You work with King Crimson?
Yes, I did.
On one record or two records?
I did 2 projects with them.
Wow.
Basically, the precursor to Thrack and Thrack. So Vroom was the first sort of, it was an album length. They call it the EP, but it was more like an album length that we recorded in upstate New York. And then we did Thrack at Real World Studios, where we covered some of the same material and redid it there.
Is that because you worked with Fripp and David Sylvian? Damn, I always say his name wrong. Yep. Cool. What was it like working with Fripp?
Oh, he's great. Yeah, amazing musician. He's one of those people that has such a great discipline in what he does. He sort of practices probably now still 2, 3, 4 hours a day.
Really? Wow.
His ability sort of transcends the mechanics of playing to the point where he now just, his hands do what his brain wants him to do or what his heart wants him to do without it kind of getting through to the brain. So he's sort of become that virtuoso.
I've seen some videos online with his wife doing these crazy, like, over quarantine. I just happened to, YouTube, you go down these stuff like, is that Robert Fripp with his wife? This is crazy, man.
Do you know who his wife is?
Yeah, Toya
Wilcox.
Toya Wilcox, yeah.
Who was kind of a pop star in the 90s.
Yeah, she was. Yeah. I never knew they were married, and I was just going through TV one day, and this really crappy show, like married famous people on a quiz show, and I was like, is that Robert Fripp? I was like, huh? I couldn't believe they were married. I was like, okay, that's hey, who knows?
She's very sweet. They're very sweet people.
Yeah, they seem like just so cute together, the two of them.
Yeah.
That's cool. So you are you working on a lot of projects?
Yeah. I'm working again. I finished an album with this girl named Danielle Schwab, and she is called Delanila, her artistry, but she's also a string arranger and string composer. So we're working on a project now that's her string side. I'm mixing that for her. I'm working with a French Canadian artist named Elsienne. More atmospheric music, a Toronto kind of progressive metal band called Imperial Ashes, working with them.
You're flat out.
Yeah, I'm busy as hell.
Wow. Have you ever got to Ireland? Did you ever do any projects in Ireland?
Sure.
Oh, you have,
Yeah,
cool.
I've been to Dublin a few times. I've been to the West Coast. The West Coast is fantastic.
Oh, that's where I'm from.
Are you from Galway?
Sligo. Near Galway. Galway's cool.
Yeah. It's a student town, Galway, more so.
Pretty much so. Yeah, pretty much so. But it's cool.
I'm not sure that I've been to Sligo, but I've been right to the coast, right, and sort of stayed on the coast for a bit. That was beautiful. And I worked with Planet as well a little bit. I didn't get to Donegal, but I did a couple of songs. Just mixed a couple of songs for Planet.
Oh, cool. Because you can do this thing now where you go to the top of Donegal down to the bottom of Ireland. It's called the Wild Atlantic Way, and you go through all these like weird nooks and crannies around Ireland. It's I did it a few years ago. It's really cool.
Beautiful.
Like, yeah, it's really interesting.
But I've been to Ireland a few times. I've chased a couple of girls over there.
Oh, have you? Irish girls.
Yeah.
Well,
You're lovely.
I've got the dyed red hair for myself. But too ginger now, you know, too ginger. I need to get this hair color removed. I'm starting to look too ginger.
Well, you got hair, so be thankful for it.
You know. But did you live in London? You lived in England for years. Bath, was it?
20 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I started in Bath. That was when I was working for Peter Gabriel, and then about 11 years there, and then 9 years in London.
Oh, cool. So when did you move back to Toronto?
Back to Toronto in 2005. I was in New York before that for about a year and a half.
Oh, cool. Do you miss like traveling around the world or?
I've done a lot of traveling around the world, so I don't think I need to do a whole lot more, but I like traveling. I'll tell you what, I like being other places. The process of getting there is inconvenient.
Oh, I'm with you, brother. Airports.
Yeah. Being in other places is great.
Yeah, once they get that Star Trek thing sorted out where they can beam you places, that'll be well handy, you know. Oh, what was it like working with Rush? You worked with Rush.
Oh, great. Really great. Yeah, we did a couple things. I remixed an album for them and then did a 5.1 movie for them. It was great.
Were you originally supposed to produce Vapor Trails?
That was the idea at one point. We had meetings and I spent a little bit of time in the studio with them. But it was an interesting time because Neil had just gotten back from his long road trip after the death of his wife and his daughter.
Yeah.
And was kind of learning to play again and learning to write again. And they were going to be doing that album for about a year. And I was sort of busy with lots of things, so I really couldn't commit an entire year to doing this one project. So we sort of didn't end up doing that. But then ironically, later on, they got me to remix it anyway. So
yeah, because I remember at the time when that came out, there was a bit of a Loudness Wars thing going on.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was probably the fans that got that push to be remixed. I'd say more than the band.
No, I think there was a lot of fan pressure to have that done. But I think the band as well were kind of in retrospect, not as happy with the way that the mixes turned out. And it's not anything against the people that were working on it at the time. It was the style of the time. That's what he was trying to make it louder, 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 and super limited. And you know, they just got caught up in that. Everybody got caught up in that process. And so, you know, we just tried to bring a little bit more dynamic back into it.
How do you find it with the Loudness Wars with regard to Spotify? Because, you know, they have the LUFS meter now.
Yeah. I mean, I try to send, you know, if I speak to the mastering engineer and they think that it needs to be a lower level, then they'll do that. But I've not found things that I've done on Spotify suffering from what I've been doing or what the mastering engineer has been doing.
I've noticed certain songs that have a more kind of that, you know, new mixes seem to be a bit more like low midi kind of sounding now, like Billie Eilish and that kind of stuff. Those songs seem to stick out more on Spotify. I don't know, is it because the algorithm, the way it identifies the frequencies or something, but
maybe. But I would say that if you haven't got a lot of upper mid energy in there and a lot of peak transients in there, you can probably get an overall louder volume on things, because it's less peak transients, and her voice is quite round.
Yeah.
Kind of production they do is quite a soft and round production. There's not a lot of aggressiveness to it, and so you're able to just get an overall louder volume out of it.
Well, that's what I love about your mixes is like they're very like 3D. They have a very like 3D kind of sound to them. Well, I think they do, anyways. So
I try to do that.
Is that just like you spend a lot of time carving, or is it just a technique you build up?
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time trying to fit things together. You know, mix it like a puzzle for me, and carving out frequencies and dynamic and pushing things back into the back of the speakers and bringing them forwards, that kind of thing.
Because I always see these kind of mixed things online, and it's always like, cut this frequency, but that it doesn't work for every song. You can't just say cut 300 hertz on a kick drum. And then everyone just does this. And at the start, you know, when I started mixing, it was so hard. It's so hard to not solo things, because But you probably didn't grow up in that kind of environment. You probably grew up just mixing purely just everything on a desk.
No, I solo things.
Oh, do you? Yeah.
I solo things to make to focus on what they are and see what's going on. Then I put it into the mix, and then I take solo and then take it out and find a position for it, find a frequency for it, and see how it relates. And then like I like to get something sort of in general of what I think is going to be right, and then relate it into the mix. I mean, look, I've been doing this for long enough. The stuff that comes to me, I can solo things and EQ something knowing what it's going to be like in the rest of the mix. That's just because I've been doing it for a long time.
That's cool. Yeah. Do you think it's an advantage growing up the way you mixed as opposed to we'll say now?
I don't know. I think it's just the amount of time and experience of doing something, coming up these days. Do I want to mix like people mix things for pop radio now? I don't know. I hear it. Unfortunately, I think for me, the things that I hear a lot of the time are, it's not so much the mixing of things, it's the way that things are produced in a sort of loop style fashion. So, programs like, Ableton and things that were sort of designed for a certain thing and are being used to write songs with, and it's great, to get ideas and be able to repeat them. But I find that people lean on that and they overly repeat things, and so it becomes quite repetitive. And once you've heard the sort of first minute and a half, that's the whole thing. And so it feels like it's more in sort of the production in that way that I think is challenging for me.
Yeah, like it's always got those trap hi-hats. Every sound sounds the same. It's like it's quite, there's no and all the chords are essentially that same derivative four chords. It's quite weird. You hear one song and you're like, huh? It's like, I know you could always kind of go commercial music, whatever, but I always found like you'll always find some sort of gem. But nowadays it's very hard because everything sounds so similar.
Yeah.
It's it's quite, as opposed to like years ago. I know everyone bangs on about, it was better in my day. But
well, I think that the reality is every era has, a few innovators and a lot of people who are derivative of that. And everybody seems to be chasing, last week's successful fish. So, it's like everybody, a lot of people, you hear Billie Eilish, she did really well. She was pretty unique compared to everybody else at the time. Now everybody's trying to be like Billie Eilish, and and it's predictable. I've seen it happen time and time again. I was working on a mixing project a while ago, and it was that very thing. It's like the way they were saying things were just basically saying, can you make it sound more like Billie Eilish? Well, yeah, I could, I suppose, but then you'd be just being a pastiche of that.
Exactly.
And so,
yeah, she has her own kind of sound, which is unique to her, she's
right.
I actually like her music. I think it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I'm not banging on her. Yeah, I think she's great. What I'm complaining about, I guess, is people trying to chase something that because it's successful, trying to recreate that. And the most successful musicians, in my opinion, have been the ones that have stood out because they're unique. And if the songwriting is good and you approach it in a unique way, that's as likely to be more successful than copying somebody else's style.
Yeah. What's your favorite record you've worked on? No, that's a hard question right there.
Really hard question. I think The Passion is certainly one of them, for sure. That soundtrack album is really something very special. All the work I did with Peter Gabriel, in fact, was a great education and sort of defining in the way that I work. The Tool things were great to work on, but there were other records that sort of fell through the cracks that didn't, like Diorama and like that Remy Zero album that I made for that band. Band called Remy Zero, and the album's called Villa Elaine.
They were like a kind of trip, kind of chilly kind of out band, weren't they?
Well, they did a few albums. Some were more sort of commercially oriented than.
I'm thinking 07, sorry. I'm thinking it's
No, Remy Zero. The album's called Villa Elaine. You should check it out. It's quite a good record.
Okay. Yeah, it's unfortunate some records that are really great records and you're like, this is gonna be, and then it just, you know. Yeah, wow, man.
I'm working on that Sylvan Fripp record. I got to go down and spend time in New Orleans
Oh,
at
wow.
Dance Studio in New Orleans, and that was great.
Wow.
I actually did a Devlin's record down there too.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I worked with Malcolm Byrne was producing, and I was engineering and mixing it for the Devlins, Colin and Peter Devlin. Do you know those guys?
I know the Devlins, yeah, but I don't know them.
Yeah.
I don't know those personally. You did like Muse, didn't you? Origin of Symmetry too.
Did Origin of Symmetry, yeah.
It was a fantastic record.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
man,
a great one.
You've done some savage stuff.
Thank you.
Wow. So do you like do you read a lot of books, or do you have time to read anything?
I'm reading two things that are kind of dear to my heart at the moment.
Okay.
I'm reading my grandfather's memoirs.
Oh, wow.
That he wrote. He fought in 2 world wars and died when I was 8 years old, but he wrote down all of his memoirs. I'm in the process of reading that, and I'm in the process of reading a book by a very good friend of mine detailing how her experience with her husband's early onset dementia.
Oh, geez, that's
It's a very, very heartfelt book. So those are the 2 things I'm reading at the moment.
Wow.
Actually, I'm reading 3 things. It's a Michio Keiko, a book about the mind.
Oh, God. I'm always reading books about the mind, man. We've always got weird minds. Well, mine is a bit on the fence. But actually, my piano teacher, he was really old. He fought in World War II. And when I used to get bored of playing piano sometimes, you know, I'd be like, oh, tell me a World War II story. And he'd take out the medals and tell me all these stories and these crazy stories. And, you know, it kind of, it affected him in a bad way, you know, like he'd still have like he PTSD. But, you know, when I was a kid, it wasn't really a well-known kind of thing, PTSD. He'd be like, you're just a bit whatever. And he'd get flashbacks sometimes.
Put on the pub, talk with your friends.
Yeah, drink that whiskey down, dull the pain, you know. But anyways, I'm sure I've taken up enough of your time, man.
Yeah, I've got to get back to work here on my mix.
All right. Well, I really appreciate this, David. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. I'll link it up on Instagram and all that kind of stuff when it's probably up in about a week or 2 or something like that.
Send me the links and I can help you out.
Oh, cool, man. Thanks so much for this. I really appreciate it so much. Have a great day. Cheers, brother.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
See ya.